in the early 60s. Can we speak about that for a moment?
The idea was to create a pretext to show that there was an attack by Cuba on the United States, and the idea was to have U.S. personnel from the CIA and other places secretly create terrorism in the United States. The documents actually said people would be shot on American streets, bombs would be blown up, and again, all this, the evidence would be laid to point the finger at Castro. One other idea was they were going to, they had a very complex plan where they were going to take an aircraft and load it with CIA people who look like college students, fly it over to have it take off from an airport in Miami with a lot of publicity, and then it would quickly, after it got into the air, land at a secret CIA base. At that same time, an identical plane would take off from that CIA base, except this plane would be empty, and it would be remotely piloted from the ground. It was a drone plane that would be very similar to the passenger plane that had just taken off. And once the plane was over Cuba, there was going to be a tape recorder that would have played a distress call into a microphone saying help are being shot at, and a few minutes later, once the plane was over the Caribbean Sea after it passed over Cuba, it would have somebody would have pressed a button on the ground, blowing up the plane, and they would have blamed Cuba for killing a plane load of American college students. At another point, they had this idea where they were going to actually John Glenn was going to go into his first space mission around that same time, and part of the plan was that if Glenn's rocket accidentally blew up on liftoff, they were going to plant evidence making it look like that it was Cuban sabotage that blew it up. These are all outrageous plans. They made their way all the way up to Secretary of Defense McNamara. Actually, the plans were all signed by all members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then they went up to McNamara, and McNamara rejected the plan, and that was the end of it. So it never got put into effect, but the fact that you can get all the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior military officials in the U.S. government, signing off on a plan that outrageous is extraordinary to me.
American, here you go, here little American, want a banana, little monkey. Look, Americans don't care that they're in cages as long as they get cheap access to cable TV and a good rate on a McNugget.
Well, exactly. If they're in a banana republic, I mean, many monkeys live behind a cage as well and are fed banana.
So I want to show you what the Jesuits were doing. It doesn't matter if they're Jesuits or it's Columbus or Francis Drake. Dollier said Mass, La Salle and his followers received the sacrament. They passed the winter unmolested and saying Mass 3 times a week. Early in spring they planted a large cross, attached to it the arms of France, and took formal possession of the country in the name of Louis XIV. This done, they resumed their voyage. Now, Columbus did this, Pizarro, Cortez, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. This is how they gain possession and make a, in their mind, a legal, legitimate claim to the territory. Now, they don't even know the territory, of course. They don't know the extent of it, but wherever they're standing, they make statements. And even though no one hears the statements, they still have the force of law. The Pope is there, and the people are conquered. Now, this is exactly what Joseph Smith was doing when he's in Missouri and making these so-called prophecies about what's happening there or going to happen there, or finding these so-called Lamanite skeletons in the Garden of Eden. They're simply trying to abscond with territory. So here's an example. A general conference was held in the land of Zion, and another revelation vouchsafed to Joseph that the whole land should be theirs and should not be obtained, but by purchase or by blood. Just what was understood by that strange wording, it is now impossible to tell. The Mormons explain it very innocently, and the Missourians construed it to mean the saints would unite with the Indians and drive out the old settlers. Well, there you go. And look, a wildcat bank. Mormons love cats. Let's diverge. He wrote Heart of the Continent. It's also a really interesting book I've got here somewhere. Can't find it or I'd show you. The Opium Papers, the front piece. That's Yosemite. in 1869. That's from a painting by someone named Bierstadt. I have to use a magnifying glass to read that. This is Fritz Hugh Ludlow. Well worth reading, not easy to find. Quoting Heber C., giving a little talk. And he's speaking about the army, and he's, teasing, ridiculing. Heber, he didn't want to see him ripped open and torn to pieces with just wrath like a gutted catfish. He pitied them, this is the army, for he thought of the day when the oppressed would have to rise again and drive the last footprint of the tire from the soil God had given to his people. He pitied the people of the states, all of them, and they were fighting their brethren for the sake of the niggers. Talk of the niggers. Where were there miserabler niggers than the poor slaves that followed the fanatic abolitionist leaders of the North? Let's stay focused here, but I'm working on a video. So this is a teaser. In Carvalho, 1856, he constantly refers to the Americats that the Indian phrase is used, which is taught by Mormons. We've got Missouri Wildcats. We've got Let the Cat Out of the Bag in Wild, page 93. Brigham Young on polygamy. To announce polygamy, the cat would have kittens. And that's a polygamy joke, kittens and cats, right? Letting the cat out of the bag. Joe's Wildcat Bank on page 36 of Beetle. That was a bank without a charter, no bonded deposit as security to the state. Calkinney Cats in Roughing It in Wiles' Mormon Portraits, 1884, we've got page 203. Hands one of the anointed cats out of its bag. Also working on a Mormon crying video. John D. Lee was called Yaw Guts because he supposedly cried. I don't believe the story. There's another story. Hate. He receives a note from Haslam. You remember he came back from Salt Lake and the doggone immigrants just missed getting saved. The Indians killed them all. And Hate cried like a baby. That's what Haslam said. And then Brigham Young, when told of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, he cried like a baby. And there's a lot of crying over Mountain Meadows Massacre. But you don't get that sense of it when you're reading what these people did. So I don't know. I have to put these back in my little filing cabinet now. We've got 3 of these little things. We've got all kinds of little subject matters in here. My memory stick's going bad, so I'm going to finish this up. So Mormons come in like Spaniards or the Brits or these Freemasons, and they make proclamations. There doesn't need to be an audience. It's simply a proclamation. So the Mormons go into a place like Missouri and claim it the Garden of Eden and say they're going to build a temple in such a place and what they're going to do. And this, of course, people find threatening. You've got Sidney Salt's sermon threatening to make a whole gore of the place. You've got the polygamy revelation. It nullifies your marriage, your business contracts. It isn't just about polygamy. Out of the box, these statements are made. Your non-Mormon marriage and contracts are nothing to them. And this led directly to the Mountain Meadows Massacre. It leads to the Mountain Meadows Massacre through Parley Pratt, the polygamy revelation, the endowment ceremony and its oaths. All these sons of bitches at Mountain Meadows, almost all, there's some kids there, were under the oaths of the Mormon endowment ceremony. And in there you swear, avenge the blood of the prophets on this people and nation. And Parley Pratt thought he had a right to another man's wife. Look, back in Genesis, what happens? Those Nephilim, remember Nephites, the Nephilim, come down and take of the daughters of men whomsoever they please. It's exactly the same thing going on here. Becoming gods. Like in Genesis, when Eve is talking to the serpent. But in Mormonism, this is heaven. And this is acted out in the endowment ceremony. The idea that this fall is a blessing. And Adam didn't fall, he fell up. And this is the kind of logic, yeah, that's what they say. This is the logic that leads to the Mountain Meadows Massacre. You murder people in Arkansas that have nothing to do with Parley Pratt. And furthermore, what about Hans Mill? Hans Mill is in Missouri. It has nothing to do with Arkansas or these people. But with this logic. So what I'm saying is what you're seeing in our nation today, if you're listening to the Alex Jones rant or whatever your favorite person is over what's going on today, it's no different than what I'm describing to you now. It's a different party. And if you don't like the way the American Indians were treated, get ready for it. I don't care if you're Irish or French or whatever. It's going to happen in this nation the way it was happening back in the 19th century. And the Mormons will be there. The Mormons were doing to white people what white people do to the Indians. Mormons, they'll just do it to white people as well. Well, I'm going to have to just print this the way it is because this memory stick is screwed up, and I'm not even sure I'm going to get this thing on, so bye.
They look upon the United States with no other feeling than hatred. A crusade against this foul horde would soon put an end to their sway.
Newspaper editors quickly answered Drummond's call for an anti-Mormon crusade. Sensational stories claimed to tell the shocking truth about life in Utah. Lurid tales of rampant polygamy, of old men marrying teenage girls, and of contempt for American laws. In reality, only about 1/4 of Mormon men were polygamous. But for America, even one polygamous Mormon was too many. As the 1856 presidential election drew near, the nation called for decisive action against Brigham Young and his sinister sex cult.